And we will get started. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to our panel on worker ownership. We hope you enjoyed the last panels on drug war abolition and green buildings. We have a equally exciting panel today on a cutting edge policy that is about a cutting edge form of organizing production and work in our economy. We have people who run the gamut in this panel today on the worker ownership story, from a legislator, Representative Carol Ammons, who has passed legislation about worker ownership, to Anna Guajardo, who has formed a co-op herself and has been involved in the formation of co-ops and groups that help form co-ops. And we have Jason Wiener, who is a co-op lawyer and serves on a collaboration in Colorado to develop worker ownership friendly policy. So we're going to get started with giving each of our panelists 2 minutes or so each to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their own personal story of how they got involved in the cause of making it easier and expanding the principle of worker ownership and forming worker cooperatives. So why don't we start with you, Anna? What's your story of being involved in worker ownership?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us here. I'm Ana Guajardo with Centro de Trabajadores Unidos United Worker Center. We're a community organization in the southeast side of Chicago and south suburbs. And so maybe about 6-7 years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Mexico and visit several co-ops, from 5 indigenous women to one that had 24,000 members. And so from there, the person who was doing our tour, we brought him here as a consultant, and then we started doing several trainings with our community leaders to see if maybe this is something that would be interested for them. And just a little bit about who we are. So our organization is normally advocating for the rights of workers, particular in workplaces where their rights are being violated by their employers. And so many of our leaders for years have asked us, can you help us start, our own businesses, or what can we do so we don't have to always be exploited by our employers? And so with this idea, we decided that we were going to begin what we call, an incubator. We're a developer organization that is developing worker cooperatives. And so as of now, we have 2 that have been developed in the last 4-5 years. And we're in the process of moving 2 more. And so, but something really important for anyone who's interested in worker cooperatives is having an understanding what a worker co-op is. And because it's not easy, right? Like anyone can say, I'm going to start up a business and just join with someone else. But I feel like you really have to understand what a worker cooperative is versus other types of co-ops, like consumer co-ops. But, the work that we specifically focus on as an organization is worker cooperatives, because we truly believe that it's important to ensure that not just one individual or a few individuals benefit from a co-op, but several individuals benefit from a co-op. Especially those who have been taken advantage in the past that can be able to start up their own businesses. So at the moment, we have a few co-ops, the Cooperativa Visionarias, which is a catering co-op, and then one that's just emerging, Mujeres Brillantes, which is focusing on cleaning, and a third one that's actually in the process of forming, which is a sewing co-op. And then we're looking at the 4th one, depending on the group of folks. But again, important for anyone to know is that it's important to ensure that you understand what a worker cooperative is, that you have the desire to want to be part of it, and then you find the right individuals that have the same interests as you do and are interested in forming this co-op. Because it's not easy, right? Like when you're working in partnership with several other folks, it's important that you have the same interests and values, and that you're able to move forward your business.
Thank you, Anna. Over to Jason.
Thanks, Pete, and nice to be with you all. My name is Jason Wiener. I'm based in Boulder, Colorado. I came to this work, actually the longer version of the story you can hear on episode 1 of the Democracy Policy Network's podcast. I won't repeat that here. I came to this work from a labor studies background. I was at the School of Industrial Labor Relations, but I was a former worker owner and in-house attorney for Namaste Solar, an employee-owned company here. I've since been running a law firm for 8 years that focuses on cooperatives generally and worker ownership specifically. And I am the chair of the governor-appointed Colorado Employee Ownership Commission, where we develop statewide initiatives, programs, and policies to support broad-based employee ownership across sectors throughout the state.
Thank you, Jason. And Representative Ammons, how'd you get involved in the cause of worker ownership and cooperatives?
Thank you for having me on this panel, and it's great to be here with Anna and Jason. My name is Carol Ammons. I'm the state representative for the 103rd District in Champaign-Urbana, which is Central Illinois. And I consider myself an activist politician. That's how I got involved into the cooperative work. Just historically, African Americans have been doing cooperative work for hundreds of years because of the way the United States history is structured to leave Black ownership out of businesses and, of course, employment. It forced us, and I think Dr. W.B. Du Bois wrote in 1906 in his book that even if you had simply bananas, form a cooperative with a neighbor who has apples and go around and sell your products and make your own money. And I think that that is the base of how I became involved in cooperative movements. But I really got involved in the legislative process of cooperatives because of Anna. That's how this happened. Anna and the Worker Center reached out to me and said they needed our support to write a law in Illinois. Now it's 4 years ago, right? For us to establish strong worker cooperative language and processes in the state of Illinois. And so we began to do a lot of work around N&M, did a lot of research around what existed in Illinois at the time that really didn't fit the needs of community members to establish their cooperatives. And so through our research and our work with the Secretary of State's office, we've since passed 2 bills I think we will talk about in this call to establish the framework that is just and equitable. And that's the lens for which I come from for us to do the work that we're doing around cooperative models. Lastly, I'll just say that it is a model that works in a system where you have high unemployment, and certainly in communities of color, in immigrant communities, we have a lot of hurdles when it comes to employment and economics. And so this is one of those avenues that become a very viable avenue for communities and certainly for women who run a lot of the cooperatives to be independent and to be able to meet their needs for their families as well as their community. And so that's why I'm involved in this process. And Anna won't let me out. She just won't let me out of it.
We're going for the second bill.
Thank you, Representative Ammons. And that bill became the Limited Worker Cooperative Association Act in 2019. Anna and Representative Ammons, could you talk a little bit about what that bill was? And Anna, why did you find, you're working on worker cooperatives and you decide we actually need to get a legislature involved to help? What's the story of how that happened? What's the content of the bill? And we'd love to hear, we're all about Statehouse Futures here. What is the next bill you want to push for as well?
Anna, why don't you start? So you start with the process of
organizing. Yeah, I'll start. Okay. Yes. So as I mentioned, we're actually part of other coalitions, the Worker Cooperative Alliance, and others here in the state of Illinois that have been trying to incubate co-ops, but we ran into many obstacles. And so, Martin Usueta, who's from Chicago Workers Collaborative, Chicago Community Worker Rights, I think we were sitting down in a meeting and we were discussing some of the issues we're having because we were trying to incubate as visionarias and trying to figure out the entire process in the state of Illinois and all the licenses. It was really hard. And we went to the city of Chicago in downtown City Hall to try to get a license for the women who were part of this co-op. And the individuals working there, unfortunately, were not educated enough and would not allow all the owners to go inside the meeting room. And so that's when we started first realizing there's this lack of education with some of these city officials who do not understand what a worker cooperative is. And from there, we started meeting, having conversations with Renee from John Marshall Law School and some other folks, Camille, about what's missing in the state of Illinois and what can we do on our end to move it. And so, Martin and others were just conversations we were just having, but also as we talked to other co-ops that were actually trying to form themselves and then understanding that in the state of Illinois, we were now recognized as a worker cooperative. And in particular us as organizations that are advocating for the rights of workers, like our desire is not to, we applaud for consumer co-ops, but we wanted to emphasize on worker cooperatives. And we looked at the statute that I think got passed in 1910 or 1915. And if you read that long ass statute, and I'm not an attorney, very confusing, and it really did not reflect worker cooperatives in the state of Illinois. And so that's when we were talking amongst each other, and some of our allies, like, what state legislator would be interested in? I kid you not, my first conversation over the phone with Representative Ammons, she had done her research and she was educating me about some of the history. And I'm like, holy crap. And I went back to the team. I'm like, I think we got our state rep. I'm like, she's definitely knowledgeable, very interested. And that's when we started having conversations with Representative Ammons and the Secretary, I believe it was the Secretary of State, to try to understand this. And I'll leave it at that.
I think.
And why don't you take it from here, Representative
Thank you, Pete.
Ammons?
Anna did a really good job, really just laying the framework. I think for me, I consider myself an activist. I don't think I ever step away from the activist space. Activists usually identify where the holes are in a process, right? And so as Anna reached out to me and shared the previous law that was already on the books, we realized that it would not meet the needs of what is modern day cooperatives. And so we needed to upgrade the law, which we did with House Bill 3663. I say the House bill in case any other members on here want to say, where's that bill at she was talking about? That's House Bill 3663. It was in the 101st General Assembly. It created the Limited Cooperative Association Act, which authorized, as Anna just described, the way that we want to form these cooperatives to really make each of these individuals to be owners, right? Because that's really what it's supposed to do. And their investment that they put in, their time, their energy, their money, their resources are supposed to come back to the workers. And I think as I think about the spaceship going up to the out of the atmosphere for 11 minutes and the $11 million per person that they spent to do that, we could really reinvest these dollars into communities in a way that cooperative serves that need, right? So that every person in the community has a role to play. And that's what this bill did. This bill also legitimized cooperatives. As Anna said, when they went into the city of Chicago to try to get a license, only one person can be the director. And I remember this fight like it was yesterday. No, all of these people can't come in here because the only person is the registered agent, like a LLC, right? An LLC has a registered agent kind of model that says, I'm only going to talk to this one person. In this cooperative change that we did, we said, no, these are the owners, and they have the right to operate and exercise the cooperative business just like any other business does. And they also are entitled to the information resources that go along with a business ownership. And so that's what we needed to do in changing the law for the cooperative. And I also wanted to just make one other distinction. I think Anna made that distinction. I'm a member of a co-op here in my community. I'm a member. I'm not an owner. So there's a difference between a membership cooperative, like a agricultural cooperative, a store that I go and purchase goods from, and collectively we are able to buy these goods together and get a good reasonable price for all of us in the community who are members of that cooperative. But in this case, that there's a collective worker cooperative, that collective, they are the owners, like the board of directors of a regular LLC or corporation. They have the right to not only acquire things that they are going to sell or make in their cooperative, but they also can sell memberships to people like me. And I think that that's a really great distinction to make so that people can understand I'm a consumer member. She's a collective member, meaning she's the part of a collective that owns. And that was a distinction we needed to make for the Secretary of State because they didn't have that in legal language, right? They only had LLC, and there was no provisions for that, which brings me to the second bill that we passed in the 102nd General Assembly. Once we passed the first bill to update the language of a cooperative and to make these distinctions that I just described, then we went around and said, okay, the Secretary of State says, well, I don't have any language to really implement it. When you do a DBA, doing business as or register as a corporation or a LLC or any other S corporation, there's a process that the Secretary of State uses in order to register your business. We didn't have that written into the language that we had initially filed. And once we started moving down to register businesses, we also saw a gap there. So we had to go back and then structure that so that we can stabilize the cooperatives as business models in Illinois. We also had to apply a fee structure that would be just like any other business in the state. But what we did in this cooperative, because I'm an activist, our goal was to make cooperatives accessible financially as well. So we didn't want to put fees and fines in a structure that was too high for the cooperative to meet. So we worked with the Secretary of State, and we also we laid out our own fee structure. We reduced the fees to register your business, to register your directors, and all of the other fees associated with a business registration. We lowered them, and I think that was the first time in my political career where a government body reduced the fee. So that was a new one, but I insisted that this creation of this new business model worked better for the people as opposed to the government, and if you understand that. And we wanted to eliminate any barriers to accessing the cooperative model. So that's what we did in the follow-up bill in 3577. And so I'm excited that we were able to really set a model in place where other states can look at this and say, how do I help chronically unemployed communities? Oh, well, here's a model that could be used to do that. And that's what we sought out to do in these two bills.
Thanks, Representative Ammons. What an amazing story, and something that if you are a state legislator or staffer or advocate watching at home, copy this model and bring it from Illinois to your state. Let's go to Jason Jason, you are acting in Colorado. Colorado has been called the Delaware of worker co-ops, and much of that is thanks to your work and your allies' work in Colorado of pushing for that. Could you talk a little bit about other areas that you think state legislators should be focused on in terms of supporting worker co-ops and in other forms of co-ops and other forms of worker ownership? Because co-op is just one form of worker ownership.
Yeah, thanks. First, I want to echo and applaud the work of Anna and Representative Ammons in not only creating a strong cooperative statutory framework, but pushing on the little details that really matter. The cost of registering a co-op and the ease of accessing a state Secretary of State filing form. Those are the crucial technical barriers that prevent ordinary people from coming together to solve their own needs, which is the genesis of the cooperative model. One thing that I think Colorado has done well is it reformed its cooperative landscape in the 90s, 20 years before anybody was really focusing overtly on worker ownership in a national way. And the historical agricultural cooperatives were refined and revised to become general purpose cooperatives. So in the 90s, we developed a cooperative corporation law. And then my partner's mentor actually co-authored the Uniform Limited Cooperative Association Act. It's a model law that's been adopted by the Uniform Law Commission, which is the group of national legislative and legal experts that create model laws. That's where the National Limited Liability Company Act came from, the Uniform Partnership Act. All the corporate forms we recognize in model form came from the Uniform Law Commission. Well, in 2008, 2009, the Uniform Law Commission adopted ULCA. ULCA became the genesis of a national movement that has taken three phases. 2009 and 10, the first wave of states adopted the Limited Co-op Association form. Colorado was in that first wave. Actually, that was 1.5 waves. We've seen a recent resurgence, both in Illinois through the Worker Limited Co-op Association Act, and then Washington State just adopted it. We have formed LCAs in 6 states. The form only exists in 10 states and in Illinois. Illinois is a cousin to the LCA because it's only focused on workers. Nonetheless, critical, crucial, and impactful. The LCA form is designed generally for co-ops. One thing we've done is work really hard on the Secretary of State here in Colorado to make sure that that entity form is on par with all other forms. So on the Secretary of State's website, one can follow the simple cover sheet filing format, pay a $50 filing fee. There is no inherent obstacle or difference in forming an LCA or a co-op than to forming a corp. And our filing fees are $50 to incorporate and $10 per year. There's no franchise tax like in Delaware. There's no $800 filing fee like California. There's no $500 LLC fee like Massachusetts. So we have formed dozens of LCAs for businesses all around the country, organized under Colorado law. The challenge for state legislatures is to push on to create agency reform to make sure that the Secretary of State doesn't interpose hurdles. And by that, I mean secretaries of state need to update their business portal to make sure that they recognize the entity forms of other states. I can't tell you, every state treats an LCA differently. So we have to register a Colorado LCA as a foreign corporation here or a foreign LLC here. New York does not even acknowledge it. We have to form wholly owned subsidiaries in New York. So I've been working with the Colorado Secretary of State to create a national movement of secretaries to create some comity and harmony in the way they look at the statutory forms in other states. We're now at a point where there are public benefit corporations in a plurality of states. There are co-op laws in a plurality of states. There are LCA laws in a dozen states, but not every other state recognizes it. And the agency, unless there's funding, has no incentive to recognize and create a home as a business-friendly community. Florida, same way. We also need law that pushes on banks to recognize and allow accounts to be opened based on entity types out of state. This has been happening for Delaware corporations for centuries. Guess what? Most of those are formed by affluent, privileged white men with expensive lawyers, and there's no trouble forming a Delaware C Corp and opening a bank account in any commercial bank. But if you try to do that as a cooperative, it is impossible because the bank form doesn't even say cooperative. So little simple changes that Representative Ammons spoke about are crucial to making sure that there's a normative framework that can support the cooperative's existence so that it can focus on the business at hand and organize its community.
Thanks so much, Jason. And just very quickly, Jason, it's not just legalizing co-ops and allowing them and creating institutional ease. You can also incentivize co-ops. Could you talk 30 seconds on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the work that we do on the Colorado Employee Ownership Commission, we have created a roadmap of ways to reduce obstacles to further adoption of employee ownership. And one is cooperatives are inherently disincentivized under the corporate income tax code and the M&A portion of the code that focuses on business restructurings. There's one mechanism that favors co-ops along with ESOPs. It's called 1042. But what we did is we've adopted a three-pronged strategy to incentivize co-op conversions. One is a grant program that will provide grant funding to cover some of the transaction costs. A loan program that's now transferable between the business owner and the buyers, the employees, to help support not just transition costs, but also the acquisition costs of the business. The third is a really cutting edge tax incentive that offers a transferable tax credit to the business owner that can be transferred to the buyers. That's a tax credit, not a deduction, but a credit of up to half of the conversion cost for a co-op up to $50,000. So $25,000 in tax credit can be given to a business that converts to a co-op. That number goes up for ESOPs. But we've tried to create some stimulus to provide for business continuity as well as resilience planning now that we're trying to look at what the post-COVID economic and community landscape ought to look like.
Thanks, Jason. Anna and Representative Ammons, in this final minute or two, any final tips, encouragement, strategy advice on people bringing pro-co-op friendly legislation to their states?
Oh, I think before that, if I could just add, you had asked me before, like, what's next? And I think something that was left out of this bill that was proposed a few years ago, well, and then during the pandemic, I think we saw it, like with our co-ops, right? Like our co-ops were not able to be participate in the PPP loan because of the size of them and because they were so new and they didn't have enough funds in the bank account. And so, I think our next steps and what we could definitely use support is capital funds. Like, how do we get some funds that could help us identify facilities or buildings where these co-ops can, for example, the ones who do catering can actually have facilities where they don't have to pay too much, because right now it costs us like maybe $300 to $400 to rent a shared kitchen where maybe your order is not enough. And so I think that's something that we're definitely looking into the future. But another thing that we would love to have, and Representative Ammons, definitely once we can get back into Springfield, a conversation again about like how do we establish in the state of Illinois our own business worker cooperative center. And so we've had a few struggles in the past where we've attempted to go as an organization and get support from the current business centers that we have. And we, one of them actually told us, we can't talk to you because you're a non-for-profit. We need the businesses to come. And so those are a few things that we would love to look into the future to see, like, how can we get more involved and what's out there missing. And Jason would definitely love to hear a little bit more in terms of like how we can look at what happened in Colorado, in your state, and look at what's happening here and how we can maybe make some of these changes. And I'm sorry, I forgot what you asked, Pete, but I just wanted to make sure we can add about like the importance of also getting funds for these co-ops, especially when they're new co-ops that are starting and don't have, or maybe are not able to qualify for a loan, a business loan.
Amen to that. And I'm always happy with interpanelist lobbying live during the summit, which is always good. Always be pushing. Representative Ammons, final 30 seconds, last word of inspiration for other State House leaders out there.
So I'll echo Anna. I am certainly interested in talking to Jason. So if you can connect us after this panel, that would be great, because there are a few things that certainly are realistic. I think the grant program suggestion is a very real thing that we could do in the state of Illinois to help foster growth of worker cooperatives. But we also want to look at what the national landscape, right? We do want to look at the national landscape so that those cooperatives can do business like a compact through all of the other states. And we don't have that as a model right now. I also wanted to suggest that I'm chairing in the final year of this term small business innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship, which is really, really where we want to start looking and digging into some of the things that Jason mentioned Colorado has done. Certainly this topic is no different than the elections topic of Colorado, which I know a whole bunch about elections in Colorado because they've done some great work out there. And I look forward to really digging in with Jason on some of the things we can learn from them to establish here in Illinois. And thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Representative Ammons. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Anna. So appreciate you all being here.
Thank you.
Drop your contact in the chat. And if you go to statehousefutures.org and fill out any audience member, we're going to send everyone's contact info so you can follow up. Thanks, everyone. Onward to the next session.